Well, hey, folks, how the heck are you? Welcome to another edition of Smashing Meats. This time we're going to be looking at AI specifically, and I know a lot of you are really pumped up to hear about this. I am. We have three wonderful speakers, and if you don't know, we do this sort of thing about once a month where we deep dive into a certain topic, where we get, people who are really like domain experts in this area, and really like talk about it in deep and meaningful ways, not just, the hype or the buzzwords that we usually hear, but getting down to the human aspects of it too. Like, how do we interact with certain things like AI, or what are the ethics or the morality behind it? How do we design for it? Those are the types of things we're going to look at here. And yeah, we're just really spoiled with the people we have. In fact, like, I just want to say in general, we all have stories to tell, and you're going to hear three incredible stories in this event. Yeah, just remember that like these stories include struggles and failures. We all learn things through our mistakes, and you're going to be hearing like the real experiences of people as they present, and discuss these really tough topics. So just want to remind you to, that like we all have stories, we all have struggles and failures, and this is, just an open and inclusive space for us to like share those ideas and those experiences and to learn from each other. We have a code of conduct. Basically, everybody's welcome. Be friendly, be cool. That's not too hard, right? And just so you know, we have captions available as well. You can go to smash.by/captions, and yeah, we'll have that accommodation all set up for you. Welcome me, I guess. Yes, and my legs really are that skinny in real life. My name is Jeff Graham. I'm one of the editors here at Smashing Magazine. I also am an editor over at CSS Tricks. I teach web development, and I just basically am a web nerd. I'm really happy to be here. I'm sitting here right here in the middle of Colorado in the United States. In fact, where are some of you in there? You can post in the chat there, as far as like, where are you dialing in from? I kind of want to know. We have a lot of people in this call, and I imagine that we cover a huge span of the globe. So that would be really cool. And why am I even chit-chatting about where we're from and all that? Because the rest of this event is going to be very heady and very deep as we talk about, AI and like very specific, deep philosophical questions about it. We can all take notes together if you go to smash.by, and then, this is like overly hyphenated URL here of like meets AI 2025. That will open up a Google Doc where we can share collaborative notes. So feel free to add to them. Whatever you pick up from it, that'd be great. We have a Slack channel where we discuss meets and where you can connect with others in real time. And of course, we have a hashtag too for Smashing Conf. So yeah, light that thing up. Well, let's see. What do we have next here? Let's see where you're from. Oh yeah, let's talk about the actual speakers. We have three amazing speakers here. I'm incredibly nervous actually because well, I don't know. I just this is the type of event that I would be dialing into and watching if I wasn't here emceeing it. So I am really stoked to start this off by we can kick this off with VITALY FRIEDMAN. Let me just get him all queued up here. VITALY's our first speaker, and I mean, like, he's a familiar face, right? Like, we all know who VITALY is. Without him, there is no Smashing Magazine, there's no Smashing conferences, and so certainly no community events like this, like Smashing Meets. He's probably the most passionate person about design and UX patterns that I know. And I'm really keen for this talk because he's going to get into the UX of AI for software, which is interesting because what exactly do UX patterns look like when the interface is not driven by physical touch, but by conversation, context, and behavior? That's going to be a really fascinating thing to dig into. So please welcome my good friend to the virtual stage, VITALY FRIEDMAN.
You're being so kind, Jeff. Like, what did I do to you to be so kind to me? I don't even know. This is incredible.
You were so mean to me. So I'm just doing the opposite of what you do to me.
Yeah, this is not fair. Life is not fair at times. But thank you so much for having me. It's I think it's actually a very interesting introduction that you brought in here, because I think we have all kind of opinions and thoughts about where are we going with this. Is it like AI first experience that we're going for, or is it AI human first experience? And there are all these reports floating around. AI is horrible. AI is great. AI is horrible. AGI is imminent. No, AGI is not coming. It's all of that. So it's very, very confusing. I hope that I will be bringing some insight of what I have learned and hopefully what everybody will find useful too.
Well, I'm extremely excited about it. And one thing I really appreciate the way that this has been curated is that I think the three talks really build off of each other. You're going to be talking about these interfaces and the interactions of them. Then we'll get into the ethics and whether or not we're actually tailoring these to user intents and like helping us shape the technology as opposed to the other way around. So this is going to be a really deep, cool talk. I'm really excited to hear what you say.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jeff. So hello, everyone, and welcome. What a time to be alive, really. I mean, we've been going through a lot of things over the last couple of years, and one of them happens to be AI. I hope that my slides, my screen is being shared, right? Because I can't see the screen. I'm just going to take it as a yes, right? Yes, all good from my end. I think, let me just double check here. Yeah, okay, so it's all good. So I just have too many screens. I have too many screens. So, dear friends, 2025, right? 2025. But I think you remember. Do you remember that very first moment when you experienced that magical AI thing for the very first time? Feels like almost a century ago now, right? And look at that magical experience, 2022, where you could type into that magical text box and that thing will think and come up with thoughts and come up with words and come up with sentences, and it would take time. We don't we don't really think about this anymore. Sometimes it would take 40 to 50 to 60 seconds to actually reply back to us, right? And then we can continue that thing. Then we can type again into that magical box, and then we need to wait for another like 50, 60 seconds. And it was really magical at the time, but now when we're looking back, maybe it doesn't feel like that magical. However, well, we've come so far over just like what, 2-3 years. We've ended up creating incredible tools. Like this is one of them, which I absolutely love, which is called My Mind. And the idea behind My Mind is that you can actually bookmark things that you have on the web that you find, and automatically tries to understand what its essence is, the semantics of it, and attach tags and categories and things like that to it. And then you can search through it, right? Basically just using hashtags or anything else. So it really understands what you have. It doesn't know there's just an image. It understands what's inside of that image. And that made things like this possible, which is Envato Imagen, where you can say, from all the images in this big archive that you have, I want you to figure out something that's like this. Different, but something that's like that. Now, we often forget that what happens under the hood then is this really magical thing of understanding what a thing is, right? Understanding what that image represents, understanding the concepts that are embedded into it. Now, in the past, we had to do it with a bit of, I guess, machine learning too, but then also a bit of categorizations and tagging and stuff like that. But now we can do it relatively straightforward, relatively quickly. And we have a lot of tools like that. But of course, it keeps going, because once you have, let's say, an object, you can pipeline or create sort of a pipeline with different prompts that would generate different things. Could be videos, could be different takes of an image, generating different images, doing something with that thing, fully autonomous and fully automated. Beyond that, it doesn't just mean the text box, right? You can go ahead and say, you know what? Let's just apply it to something like a complex environment, like maybe GIS, where you're dealing with maps or so, right? So on the left, you have your side panel. On the right, you have this output of that AI conversation, if you like, right? And what you can do with this, right, you can basically say, map out all the different events or all the different areas with 500-meter buffer around the specific thing that meet a specific criteria. And then on the right, you have different data layers that allow you to filter in and filter out what you need and what you don't need. So that's way, way far away from what we actually experienced in the very first ChatGPT experience. Not to mention all the things that we see with tools like this, like Creo and Shapes and so on, where you can actually create an abstraction or design an abstraction on the one side, and then ask AI to just do the thing for you, right? So you can basically pretty quickly draw something that's relatively low fidelity, right? And say, hey, that's what I actually want. I want to have something like a rabbit on the moon in a 3D Pixar style scene with vivid lighting and photorealistic, right? And then you have the result, right? Now, there is one thing that happened in that journey, right? And I mean, this is actually quite remarkable just to see how far we have come already. And it's been 3 years in, right? Do you still, please write in the chat, Yes, if you still say please or thank you to ChatGPT or Perplexity or Gemini or whatever it is that you're using, please say yes if you do. Just writing please and thank you and all these polite feelers, right? Many people have abandoned that. We did that a lot in the beginning, but now it's more like software. And that brought up some significant implications. And I mean, also just one thing I want to show, which is really, really impressive. Again, I'm going to look up the chat in a moment. It's really impressive that in the beginning, we were thinking just about a text box. You basically interact on the level of a text box. You can surely upload something using that text box and so on. But now what we get is an option and access, not only to different tools with MCP and all of that stuff, we'll maybe talk about it later, but also being able to have a question and have it answered on the foundation of the tabs you have open in the browser. So you can say, you know what, I have all these Airbnb tabs open in my browser. Can I have a conversation with the AI about that? So you can scope it to all the tabs that you have open, and then say, compare these Airbnbs that I have open in the browser in a chart. And so you have that, right? And so this is coming from a browser called Dia, which I believe don't exist anymore, but now Perplexity has come up with Comet, which is, again, another browser that allows you to do the same thing. So magical, right? So when we look at this, though, I always found myself very, very confused, because when you look into research, you'll find that there are a lot of challenges that most products have, and that I would say are not even properly considered when it comes to AI products. And I'm really frustrated by that, I have to say, because many of you might have been in a situation where whatever you do, be it a visual AI interface, be it a pipelining interface, be it a canvas, be it a side panel, be it an assistant or anything else, you probably will experience some of these issues, which are really, really frequent. First of all, AI suddenly imagines things. We call it hallucination. AI silently assumes things. If it doesn't know, usually it doesn't ask. There are some exceptions, and some tools are going in that direction. Most of it, I think it's the last version, the DeepMind from Google, that will actually ask you if it doesn't know. It has an understanding about or perception of what it means not to know things, right? Also, AI suddenly forgets things. You keep having a conversation, and then you realize maybe a couple of prompts down the line that it has forgotten what you have mentioned initially, right? What the hell? You also see and realize that sometimes it just changes its perspective. It says one thing, and then all of a sudden, a few prompts later, it changes its mind. It often says what user wants to hear. Often it takes way too much time to reply because it generates all these tokens. It's actually too verbose. It always starts with something. What an excellent question you are asking. I will do my best to find the right answer for that. And given the context in which you are, of course, it's a relevant question to ask. And that's just too verbose. We don't necessarily need that. If anything, it's a waste of tokens, waste of everybody's time and energy as well, right? Also, if you have a longer conversation, eventually the quality of AI drops. The AI response is very easy to manipulate depending on how you ask that question. If it's a leading question, you will probably get a positive answer because AI wants to tell things that you are going to approve. And of course, as we will be speaking about later, AI heavily amplifies biases and stereotypes that it has in its data. And then there is more to that. And these are all the different things that you can find. Like, for example, people would often say, well, I do something, but AI doesn't really listen to me, or it never questions my hunches and my ideas and my thoughts. It doesn't work reliably. It needs me to type all the time because you always have to articulate your intent by typing. It never asks me for key detail that I have forgotten to mention, so I have to wait until it responds and then come back to it. It doesn't show me what to do. Right? It just asks me to ask it anything, but I don't know what exactly I should ask, right? It also has huge walls of text, like I do have here on the slide. Sorry about that. The responses that you get are hard to tweak, and very often, especially when you're dealing with something like, I don't know, cursor or anything like that, it quickly brings you to the limitations of your plan, and so you have to pay. So we often speak about AI-first software, and I want to really flip that. Because I think that we're living in a world where the human value has become so incredibly important because somebody must be guiding and orchestrating these AI experiences to do anything meaningful, something meaningful for people. Because no technology has any value if it's not really useful to anybody, right? And if you see a lot of situations like that happening and it doesn't really get significantly better, actually, which we'll probably have to talk about later, then what is the point of having AI if nobody can trust it? And I think there is so much excitement about AI, while at the same time there is very little reliability, accuracy, stability, and actually, just honestly, just value. It's one thing if you're using AI just to find 5 movies for the night, that doesn't require high accuracy, right? But is it really the best use of the technologies that we have? And if we're designing a product, let's say financial sector, in healthcare, and in other areas where it can really drive significant impact, we probably want to at least address some of these issues over here. So how do we do that? Well, for me, it all starts with a very simple approach. Value proposition first. That means before we even start thinking about AI, even if it's an AI first product, we need to understand the problem that we're solving and the value that we're delivering. Now, most businesses leave off competitive advantage. That competitive advantage comes from 2 things. It's either cost leadership or it's differentiation. And it's in the differentiation that usually the value of UX and the impact of UX lives. But you cannot produce any differentiation if your software, because AI in the end of the day is software, right, is not stable, it's fragile, it's unreliable, and just inaccurate. So we do need to deliver a value proposition, which means, by the way, that we need to understand what is it we're giving to people. And you see a lot of AI first products going in and saying, you know what, our AI is the value proposition. We're going to market our product as AI product, and that's going to drive everything, drive waves around. And it turns out, as we will see in a second, that it's probably not that important to people. What is important is the value that AI provides to them. So if anything, in most products, in most scenarios, in most organizations, AI should be a key resource rather than a value proposition. So what does it mean for all of us? And what do we do with that? Well, when we actually start looking and start trying to figure out how do people perceive it, right? How do people deal with AI? We will see that one thing has become really surprising. Remember, again, 2022, we all were very, very excited about what AI brings to the table. Now, this is a study that came up where they decided to test 2 different types of messaging. On the one hand, we have Zendesk messaging here, all around AI, AI for service catered to humans, right here. Artificial intelligence infused into every interaction. And on the other hand, here we have Zendesk value messaging without AI. It's just service that's up close and personal, maximize the relationships in every interaction, right? So AI messaging, no AI messaging. The same for Intuit. In Intuit here, your generative AI-powered financial assistant versus your on-demand financial assistant save time, stress, and money. So which performed better in terms of conversion, in terms of interest, in terms of engagement? Well, it doesn't matter because people don't care about AI as much as we all do. What they care about is the value that AI provides, right? And so when you look around, like what does labeling with AI brought, it didn't bring anything. Has no significant effect on how much people trust the output of the tool at all, right? With 767 people participating in this study. So all of that just to say that very often, it doesn't really matter if it's AI or not, as long as the value is provided by that. So how do we then provide that value? Well, great question. Let me show you a couple of examples that I think do it really, really well. It all starts with being able to understand what AI provides and what AI brings to the table. Very often we assume that if we just put asterisk and sparkles everywhere, then people surely will understand what that means and what that represents. And that's not quite true. If we look around, we will find that AI discoverability is one of the fundamental challenges that people are experiencing. Users didn't expect or think to look for AI features in apps or sites. They don't expect and they don't necessarily hunt for AI unless they have to, for one reason or the other. They didn't notice, didn't comment on, or use them. They couldn't easily find these features either, even when directed to look for them, coming from one of the studies on AI features by Norman Nielsen Group. That specifically relates to a very, very simple use case from Amazon. Now, Amazon introduced a while back a little thing that's called Rufus. Some of you might be familiar with it. Rufus is an AI assistant that is provided by Amazon, right? And let's see what the participant here had to say. Yeah, so I'm not sure if the audio was coming through or not, but the point
Not
is
coming through, yeah.
not coming through. That's okay, but we had subtitles anyway, right? The issue was here, right, is that that person had no idea, never heard of Rufus before, and never even had any interest to experimenting and playing with Rufus to understand what it actually can do. And that shows up in different places. So if you have, let's say, something like that's called Rufus, a Rufus button in global navigation, then you shouldn't be surprised that people are not clicking on it. On the other hand, also, even if you have something like an icon, maybe in the bottom right here, which basically just looks like sparkles, I guess, people don't interact with it either, right? Because they're not curious, they're just used to their way of thinking. It also keeps going when you actually include them in autocomplete suggestions. So when you type in something like headphones here, right? The main attention is going to the areas where people find, useful, like, or relevant, or they just used to over the years. So nobody acted on this either. And I think that a lot of the time we kind of assume that surely people will notice, and then they don't. And that brings us all to this point of, if you want to make it more noticeable, you kind of have to make it more noticeable as a separate section. Here's an example from TripAdvisor, where they basically do have a label and they do explain what is here, and they do provide some suggestions, and obviously they have a text box here as well, right? So you can interact with it if you want to. But in general, I would say we need to be very careful with the sparkles icon. It is expected in many ways or the other, but it's only expected if it's a chat, right? Not every AI interaction is going to be chat. But in many ways, if it's a chat experience, if anything, it is expected to be in the bottom right corner, because this is where customer service or customer service experience in general will probably be most of the time, right? And of course, if you actually include something like this here, this is coming from a product called Gemma. And in Gemma, you basically can interact with different areas of the mockup that they generated, right? Have this drop down with sparkle. So you click on it, and then it actually does something. I'm not quite sure if it's always obvious what exactly it is doing, because in the end, it's kind of ruffles and shuffles through different designs, right? Would it be obvious? I'm not 100% sure, right? So that also keeps going when you look into this sparkles fever, right? Because when there is a study that came from Google that introduced actually sparkles many, many years ago now. And the idea behind this sparkle sphere was, well, let's see if people understand it in our Google products. And this is what they found out. Sparkles evoke the feeling that it's clean, new, improved, and special. It successfully signals AI in Google products, but it doesn't always convey gradual meaning. So you always need to test how reliable that icon is. Here's an example that they used and where some problems occurred. So if you have a sparkle next to featured in the 20 best boutique hotels in Zurich, do you understand what that means? What is that exactly? Is it just an illustration? Is it a summary? Doesn't seem to be. Does it mean that you're actually collecting these 20 best boutique hotels by AI? Or what is that exactly? Or when you get something like this, right? 10 minutes walk to FIFA World Football Museum. What does it mean? It's not obvious, right? What about guests mentioned breweries 24 times? What does that mean? Exactly. Is it that results are coming from AI? Is it the results are being summarized by AI? What exactly does that mean? And of course, Google ended up creating a bunch of different icons in here, right? Some of them might be working depending on the context in which it is being used, of course, right? But we shouldn't be forgetting that even when it comes to like this icon right on its own, there are different applications that also use sparkles. This is a plane finder that also uses sparkle, but what's new? This is promotions by Lyft, happens to be sparkles too. Then you also have the star icon for ratings. Then you have Discover icon by Ulta. And then, of course, you have the Starbucks offers, which happens to be sparkles as well. So I would never just say, you know what, sparkles fine, let's just use sparkles to indicate what AI can do. So what is the outcome of this then? Well, some design systems and some teams decided not to use sparkles at all. Instead, they used some sort of a signifier that indicated this is AI. This is coming from the Carbon design system, right? Where we basically have just a box which has AI in it. It's quite obvious, quite straightforward. And then, of course, you have different areas where it could be highlighted. For example, within a text box, within the input. So this input might be AI generated, right? And you might want to explain that as well. You might have different states there as well. Users might be able to override it, right? And then you need then to be able to revert back to AI input, right? Obviously. But then, of course, you might have a situation where some sections will be AI generated and some others will not. Or maybe some specific points of data points would be AI generated or AI summarized in some way. So you kind of need to highlight that. So you get this AI badge all over the place, right? But then also sometimes you would have a situation where some things are AI generated, others are not, right? Or the entire card here, the entire report is AI generated. So you might need to be prepared for that. And I see quite a few teams actually going this direction. One of them is ServiceNow team, which has a horizon design system. And in there, they're speaking about the spectrum of AI signaling, which means different icons used for different purposes. So if it's just an action, right, then it has a sparkle on it. If it's actually a value that's being highlighted, right, on form fields and cards, that has a different view and has AI badge next to it, right? And then they also use sparkle for different things like alerts, labels, and tabs. Well, that works for them. That's just an idea of what we could do here, right? But this is just a start. I mean, discoverability is one issue. From my perspective, and this is something that I've been researching for the last 2 years, and we have a video course on that coming up soon as well, right? It actually has a lot of really challenging UX components, specifically 6 areas that really require a lot of attention. It's scaffolding, which means how we are composing different AI elements. How do we lay out AI features as well? How do we present that? Is it going to be like a center stage AI experience like ChatGPT? Is it the side panel on the left or on the right? Is it dedicated cards with the AI label here and there? How is it going to work? Interaction design, both in terms of accessibility, but also the specific interaction modes, right? There also goes like voice mode, for example. It's also about input. How do people articulate their intent? It's about output. How do they deal with the output of AI or AI outcome? And then this so-called refinement journeys where they're trying to tweak and bend AI to get the most value out of it. And then, especially in the world of agents, how do we orchestrate all of that and safeguard all of that to ensure that we're actually getting decent results? And I want to highlight maybe just a few examples of where I think all of this works really, really well and what's really, really impressive. And for that, I'm actually going to maybe jump out right here and show it to you right in the browser. I hope you can see it. One of the applications that I actually really admire, and I think that this is probably one of the best AI examples out there for any kind of search, way superior to Gemini or ChatGPT or anything similar, right? Now, what we get here is just a search, right? It's a research. And specifically, if I'm asking for, let's say, something like, I don't know, what's maybe, I don't know, hypermetria. What is hypermetria? What causes it, right? Off it goes, and it does the research on my behalf, right? And it gives me some results, and it gives me the summary, as it, of course, should. And it kind of keeps going, right? And on the other hand, what it also provides is something that we, I think, overlooked or forgotten about in all the excitement about AI. Like, for example, filters. Why don't we have filters in ChatGPT? Why don't we have filters in Gemini? Why don't we have filters everywhere? Why do we need to write it? That seems like a very strange thing to do. We wouldn't expect everybody to always be writing in a text box. So why don't we have filters like this? We can say, you know what, I'm interested in specific publications published in the last 5 years, and maybe also with a specific ranking, and also maybe of a specific methodology that is relevant to me, and maybe with a specific sample size that is important to me as well. And as of fields of study, I'm interested in chemistry and also in biology and nothing else. So apply these filters and maybe also break it down by countries too. So you can do that, right? And so if I look back here maybe for a moment, and then just try to get something, I don't know, something that's here already. It's maybe a little bit more popular as a topic, right? We kind of get a very different sort of integration or navigation between the different areas. Not to mention, of course, that additionally to that, you get a few extra features. Like, for example, here, you have different views if you want to get more details or less detail, right? You can also obviously act on the level of individual paper as well. You also see these little numbers representing citations, right? You can jump right to them if you need to, if you want to, all right? Plus, and I think that's really, really important, it also actually evaluates what it sees in front of it, right? So it actually highlights the evidence strength. We're adopting critical thinking. why isn't it a default at this point? Why is it always just a summary of what you discover on the internet? Internet is not reliable. It's not trustworthy. If anything, we need a lot of curation to make it work, right? And it kind of keeps going. You kind of get this idea. But where it really shines, and this is why I'm saying that this is probably one of the best examples out there, is that you can actually have consensus meter, where you can say, you know what? I want to not just get a summary of all of that, right? I want to see what's the trending, or what's the trend that we're looking at here. How do different papers, right, think or assume or kind of view a particular point? So we can't see it over here because we don't get enough results. Damn it, let me just take a look at maybe what are the effects of drought, let's say. So I just hope that it's going to be showing up. Right, it's only 20 sources, but hopefully we will get there, right? Maybe while it's on it. Okay, so that's her. So it kind of gives, it will give you not just the results that we have here, right, but also giving you the consensus, like how many papers agree with a particular statement or disagree with a particular statement. A very simple thing that is often forgotten, right? But on the other hand, I think it actually can go much further than that. So if we look at some examples, let me just jump in, maybe over here, just a second. Yes, over here. I'm also wondering, like, even if you think about, let's say, something like an overview of how different papers perceive or see a particular point, right? And if they agree or not agree, we can do more with this, because we also need to support people in being able to navigate whatever content is in front of them. And I absolutely love the idea that Maggie Appleton has suggested a while back, maybe a couple of years ago now, which is called daemons. Now, daemons are basically characters that sit in the background of your UI to help people explore the output of AI through the lens of personalities. What the hell does that mean? Well, that basically means that what if for every person who is using a particular product, they could define their own custom profiles that could sit next to the output of AI. So whenever they need to say something, like maybe I want to summarize it, or I want to have to apply critical thinking to it, or I want to play devil's advocate, or I want to synthesize different parts of the output. What if we could do that just by clicking around buttons? You know, buttons. I think in that overall AI excitement, we totally forgot about the importance of good, nice buttons. Why not have more buttons in all these experiences? So very often, remember, you probably, if you're using ChatGPT, you will see that ChatGPT has memory now. Perplexity has memory now. Gemini has memory now. But the problem with memory is it is all polluted, because you usually, as a human, have very different hats of personality. I mean, maybe not personalities, but hats. So you might be asking one question about health of your child in the morning. You might be asking a financial question during the day because it's part of your work. You might be asking for movies, for family movies, or I don't know, thrillers, or something like Fargo or whatever in the evening, right? And you might be looking for just some summaries of, you know, whatever stock exchange going on in the stock exchange, which is not necessarily related to your financial work, right? But you're just curious about what's happening. But all of these questions are very different. Now, what all of these AI tools at the moment do, they combine all of those things as memory indicators of what they know about you, and then they shape the output based on all of that. But you can't just say, you know what, I have this question, focus specifically on financial domain because you know me. Or I have that question, focus specifically on health because, you know, this is about my child and the health, right, story here. So focus specifically on that and what you know about me in terms of health, in terms of finances, in terms of my hobbies, in terms of the movies that I like and preferences, and so on. So that's exactly that. So if you have different profiles that they can switch between, right, you can say, you know what, let's explore this output through the lens of devil's advocate. Or let's explore that output through the lens of, you know, evidence. Do you have any evidence in that, right? And you can even have a conversation on that too. Oh, hold on, let me select this part of the output and that part of the output and this part of the output, which a lot of people do, and then copy paste in a text editor, right? But let's just ask, can you do this plus that and just synthesize? Otherwise, what people do is they copy paste this part that they liked or they found important or useful to them, either in a text editor or back into the text box, and then ask AI to summarize it for them. That's usually just a waste of time. Not to mention, of course, that they also should be able to create their own demons, so their own characters or profile or whatever it is that we call it, right? That's really, really significant. There also goes a bit further, so maybe just 4 or 5 minutes that I wanted to kind of highlight a few things here, right? I really, really believe that we're totally missing out on an opportunity to do something that's, I think, quite profound, like modifiers. Modifiers are the little questions that AI will ask you if your query is too generic. What I ultimately want, right? Because again, to avoid this incredible waste of people typing things, sending a query, then realizing that they've forgotten something, then waiting for AI to come back to them, and then type it all over again with just that little detail they have forgotten. That's just incredibly wasteful for everyone, not only in terms of the planet, right? But also they're just sitting there waiting for a reply for maybe 20, 30 seconds. That's not great experience. So what if AI took an effort to really help people shape the best prompt they can before sending it to AI? Wouldn't it be better? And that's the idea behind modifiers. We will proactively ask for more context from the user when the initial prompt isn't sufficiently clear or is a bit too generic. It could look something like this. This is an example that's coming from Perplexity. And Perplexity, whenever you're typing something like very generic, like give me suggestions for gifts for my friend, it will actually ask you proactively, what is the occasion for the gift? Who is it for? Can you tell me more about it? And I always wonder, so how come that I always have to ask AI something, but it never asks me anything? Don't I matter? Right? Shouldn't it ask me something if it realizes that I've forgotten something, which I often do? And even that, why should it be a text box? Couldn't it be, I don't know, buttons? Can I just maybe select a bunch of checkboxes and radio buttons and call it a day? And yeah, Perplexity heard me. What are common patterns and heuristics designers should be thinking about when working with AI? Well, you know what? What type of products are you interested in? Instead of typing, just checkbox or radio buttons, just select what is relevant to you over here. Click, 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 next. And that's it. This is just so much more efficient. So I don't think that we have to stay true to that text box alone. That doesn't make sense. And we can do more than that. Because wouldn't it be nice if you could say, you know what? People are doing quite similar tasks in our product, right? So wouldn't it be reasonable to create something like a task builder for them? For example, here you have different options, right? I want to ask, search, explain, do some data science, analysis, summarize, research, and more. And I want to use my Slack, Gmail, or Salesforce, Drive, browser tabs, Notion, calendar, whatever else. And I want to make a document, a table, a PowerPoint, a meme, a sheet, an image, a Word file, and stuff like that. So instead of even typing a query, right, you just click, 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 send. Isn't it nice? So this is exactly the idea. I want to search for Notion, my Notion, for a specific topic that you can write down, and then create a PowerPoint presentation summarizing the findings. So now the only thing you need to do is to specify what topic you find relevant. Or I want to summarize maybe my Slack channel, but you need to select what channel you actually want to get information from, and maybe create a meme out of that or generate a summary or report out of that. That's quite impressive, and that doesn't take that much effort, to be honest, right? And if we keep going, right, this is again just the starting point. I'm really a big fan of avoiding this articulation cost by typing. That's a very inefficient way to communicate anything, right? Especially when you need to be precise. And so one example of that, which I found quite remarkable, is Flora. With Flora, you basically do the pipelining, where you can say, you know what, I have multiple outputs, multiple inputs, and I want to put them through filters to generate something else. Now, what you see on the left is a photo that's been uploaded by the user. On the right next to it, you see a few illustrations, patterns that have been also generated by AI, but could also be uploaded. And what you do now is basically saying, you know what, let me just create path and pipelines. So I want to connect this photo with this illustration to generate a new one, right? And I want to do the same for the second illustration. And I want to do the same for the third illustration, right? Obviously, you can enhance it with a prompt, but that prompt can also be generated automatically for you without you having to type it. And so it applies basically the second illustration to the first image, and then it gets the output. Now that output then can flow into something else. For example, if you want to have, let's say, a new image generated with replaced fashion outfits, right? So you basically connect the dots yet again over here. You might want to write your own prompt or just ask AI to write it for you, and then it generates it for you, right? And then from that, you can say, hold on for a moment, let me just generate maybe something like a video, right? Or maybe a couple of variants of that video, and then off you go, right? So the moment the next time you come back and you replace one image and you replace maybe these kind of inputs, you can generate these things relatively quickly without you ever having to write a prompt, which I think is actually on its own quite impressive to see and to look at, right? And maybe just one more example I do want to show here to indicate just what we can really do to make it even better, right, is this one, which is also, again, all circling around the same topic. We probably need less text and more buttons. This is an example that's coming from the tool that's called Wiscom. And in Wiscom, you can basically take an object, and then you can indicate with a few operations what exactly you want to have generated. And that works by manipulating, controlling filters or areas next to it. So if you have, let's say, an image and you want to get a new view, right? You basically select where the view should be coming from. Instead of writing it with a text in a text box, you basically just click. Or if you want to change the expression from curious to anxious or anything similar, you just navigate on the slider. You can also extract material, and you can also change the variation of the form as well to make it more organic, more geometric, and so on. Right? Let me show you what it looks like. So if you have, let's say, an object like that, right? Basically say, I want different variants of that in different places, right? And then it just generates these three options for you. You never had to write a prompt at all. Instead, you click, 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 I want this, I want that, and I want that, and it generates it for you, right? On the other hand, if you want different expressions, right, you want to say, change expression, and then you can go from calm to, let's say, very excited or something similar, right? And you generate these options for you right here, right? Also keeps going when you actually have, let's say, a car, and you want to maybe change the form of it, to experiment with it, to play with it a little. This is how fast it can be. I mean, I'm not saying that we should be doing this, like generating 20 outputs just for the sake of it, because why not, right? But this is, again, in terms of experience, if you need to provide this, when people need it to, do their work faster, to waste less time doing whatever it is that they do, then it's probably worth it. So with all of that in mind, what does it mean for us? Well, just to sum up, I think that probably the most important thing, at least for me, is really to be aware and beware of AI hype. There's an enormous amount of noisiness around AI, what it can do, what it cannot do. But frankly, what I care is about not what it can do, but what it brings to the table in terms of real value to real people who need to do real work day to day, right? If it's just a couple of funny memes, then I don't see much value in it at all. If, on the other hand, it actually helps people to avoid mistakes in healthcare, or to, helps people waste less time, in things like, I don't know, accounting or anything like that, then maybe that's a good thing, right? Because otherwise I'd be wasting hours and hours of work sitting in front of the computer doing repetitive work. There is no value in that. So the value of any technology lies not in itself, but in the real impact that it actually brings to real people. And AI features on their own are not very useful if they are not really used, right? So we probably want to keep that in mind. And with that, I want to highlight just 3 resources which I think are really, really useful if you want to dive deeper. On the one hand, there is A Shape of AI by Emily Campbell, a fantastic resource with all kind of interaction patterns around AI. I barely scratched the surface. Emily, incredible resource, has put a lot of work, so please support her if you can as well. Putting it all and categorizing it all is fantastic, absolutely fantastic. There is also a wonderful resource which everybody should know more about, which is called AIUXpatterns.com by Luke Bennis. A lot of experiments, a lot of surprising patterns that you might want to explore as well. Really, really phenomenal work. And Luke kind of keeps adding things every other day as well. wonderful. And then, as we're speaking about AI, we need to speak also about building trust. And that trust doesn't come for free. So we need to spend time investing time and effort as well to make sure that people can actually trust AI products in the first place. And so for that, we have a design patterns for building trust, which is a wonderful catalog of different design patterns, not only for AI, but also for AI, from projects by eve.com. So please take a look. It's also a wonderful, wonderful resource. Also, I have to mention at this point that we've been working on AI video course on AI design patterns, because what I showed you is just 20, 30 slides from something that's like 1,000 slides and 1,000 examples that we have put together, right? So that's coming on very, very soon. So please watch out for that. Also, just have to mention that we do have other video courses too. One of them all around measuring UX and design impact, and you can get friendly 20% off with the wonderful code MITS, measureux.com. Maybe we'll put a link into this later too. And then there is another one on smart interface design patterns. And of course, there is also the AI course coming on soon, right? I think that's it from me. And with that come cats and more cats. And I hope that at least some insights that we had so far that I have highlighted are useful and will bring you to the best track. The most important of them is we really don't need more text boxes. We probably need more buttons and more simple way for people to actually get where they want to be and get value from it, from that journey and experience. So I hope that this was useful, everyone. Meow, and thank you so much for being here.
Hey, how's it going there, VITALY? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I do.
Oh, awesome. Which means I'm not talking with my mute button on like I usually do. That's great.
No. I think we all hear you loud and clear, and it's fantastic to hear you as well.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you for the presentation. You gave us like a whole heck of a lot to consider and to take into and to put into mind here, when it comes to designing for AI experiences, when it comes to AI first software. You talk a lot about value propositions, and I'm really not curious about, I'm just really interested in that, because that's something I feel like that's been missing in my own understanding of AI. It's like, hey, here's this tool, use it, go do something with it. And I don't know. I'm not the most creative person in the whole world. I'm not always going to know exactly what to do with a blank slate on something like that. Do you think companies have done enough or put enough effort into using AI as a resource to create value proposition? Like, what is missing there?
I think the main issue is that we have enormous expectations about what AI can do. But in reality, what happens is it's just not great for what we think it is great for. There is a big dissonance or big cliff, I would say, between what designers imagine and what can then be implemented to provide accuracy and provide good results. And that cliff is huge. I mean, it's very easy to pull off a quick demo that shows incredible capabilities in enterprise software. But the problem with enterprise software is that mistakes are expensive. I mean, expensive. So if you do something that just goes off cliff altogether, right, and you have, let's say, a particular feature that is all of a sudden gives somebody a very bad recommendations and they act on it, that's a disaster, right? But AI is not, I mean, it's supposed to be software, but it's not reliable, right? And so my issue with that is that we really need to, instead of, I would even say, I mean, maybe I'm just too, I don't know, too grumpy at this point. But I would say instead of going all in at AI first, I would say let's just go AI second, but deliberately. And what I mean by that is let's just look at where AI brings value, then safeguard it to guarantee as much quality and much accuracy as we can by scoping it, by asking people to specify their intent more clearly, and so on and so forth. And then maybe sparkle a bit of AI when it's needed. And this is often called quiet AI, where we take existing user journeys where people really struggle and where AI can excel. Like a simple example of that would be, summaries, synthesizing data, clustering data, things like that. There is not much harm in it. But if it's a financial sector and you have a financial tool that allows people to ask for recommendations where to invest, I probably wouldn't trust AI to do that well, even if I was very optimistic.
Well, we hear about instances now where AI is being used for therapy, even in mental health, and we've seen some horror stories pop out of that
Yes.
where folks have developed mental health issues because of their use of AI. Is there an ethical responsibility by companies to put that effort into a value proposition without just arming people?
Yes, I think that if I'm being very honest, I think that uh, most companies are aware that something can go wrong, but they just take it as a risk because they don't want to be behind. I also find that a lot of companies are desperately hunting for ways to integrate chatbots, not because they see any value in it, just because they don't want to be missing out on whatever AI might bring to the table, right? And I would say that even at times there is a very strong desire to push back on ethical considerations, security concerns, and all that, just because, well, if we don't experiment, we will never get anywhere. This is kind of the attitude, right? And of course, that's wrong. And I think in many ways, it's it's really just a matter of being more, not just being more cautious, I would say, but being proactively scoping to something that's clean, right? Because a lot of data that AI is kind of taught on is just incredibly polluted, incredibly noisy, incredibly biased, incredibly racist, incredibly stereotyped, incredibly wrong, and just not cleaned, right? And if that's the data, then you shouldn't be surprised that you get what you get, right?
Yeah.
So there is a lot of attention that we must spend on that data and how AI even gets to understand what it gets to understand, and that requires also to be scoping, right, properly. And I wish that every single AI tool had a one single button. I mean, you can see that job. I really like buttons. Watch one single button saying scope to a particular level of expertise. So I want to ask that question, but based on 10 years of experience of a doctor, not just by doctors, what doctors recommend, based on 5 years of experience, 10 years of experience, maybe based on, I don't know, how many references or mentions it had, positive mentions it had in academic papers or anything similar, right? Scott calls it grounding button, and I think that maybe that's exactly that, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, we end up with just random stuff that's really sounds remarkable, but in the end, doesn't bring anybody anywhere.
I've got a slightly leading question for you that just popped in my head. Do you see any parallels with the release or the evolution of AI as the internet when when it was evolving too? And because that was also in a sense a general purpose type thing, although it had been used for very specific purposes, before it was released to the general public. Like, is there some sort of like lesson that we can learn from the initial rollout of a revolutionary technology like that?
That's a great question, Jeff. Um, I think it's very interesting that you bring this up because I remember vividly the first time I experienced the internet. Right, this was really the same feeling for me. It felt like it's really really magical, and it felt like you can do everything with it, and it was really really wonderful,
Yeah.
right? But in many ways, it was just on its own quite well, relatively speaking, quite a small space, right? Now we have something that sounds incredibly authoritative, incredibly right, and is really, really good in guiding people in all the wrong places. Also because AI just wants to please us in the end. It's not like an universal source of truth or anything like that. It just wants to provide an answer that's most plausible to give people what they want to hear, right? And that brings us to the place where we kind of push the burden, which is not fair. We push the burden of articulating intent to people, so they have to be accurate in what they say to AI, right? But also we put the burden of articulating or understanding how accurate AI is or isn't also to people, and that's not fair either, because people are really bad at both, and critical thinking and also articulating what they actually want. And I hope that we will be twisting it, so at least we will have some safeguarded rules, which we already have, but they are really very simplistic, to almost shield people from negative impact of AI and also negative input of providing inaccurate or not complete information.
I think you've just unpacked it or like opened up a can of worms that would, make for a really
I
great
think you'll
discussion,
close it, I'm sure.
absolutely. No, I know you have to run off to a workshop because you're a busy guy. You got your fingers in lots of bowls. I'm excited about that. And yeah, just thank you so much for squeezing time in here and
Oh,
like
absolutely.
sharing
It's always
with
a
us.
pleasure. I wish I
Yeah,
could spend more time here today as well. Thank you so
I know.
much, everyone. Have a
Thank you.
fantastic rest of the day.
Bye, Italy.
Bye bye.